Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Hall, for calling in. I do have one more question. How many times do you meet as a board?
We meet, we've done some Zoom meetings like everybody, but we meet at least twice and sometimes 3 times a year, if my recollection is correct. I think the statute says we have to meet in 2 different quarters, maybe 3 different quarters. I know usually we meet 3 times a year that I recall. But sometimes if we can't get all our business done, or something comes up to where we need to get it approved, we'll have a special meeting to address something that slipped through the cracks, and because it's statutory regulation, we need to get it taken care of by a certain time.
Okay, thank you. Again, thank you for your willingness to continue to serve, and appreciate your time this morning. And have a good day.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, goodbye. Is there anyone who would like to testify as a proponent for Mr. Hall's reappointment? Any testifiers as a proponent? Anyone would like to testify as an opponent? Anyone would like to testify in the neutral capacity? Seeing none, that will close our hearing on the reappointment for Mr. Robert Hall to the Environmental Quality Council. Our next hearing we'll have will be on for a reappointment for Mr. Joseph Sita. Mr. Sita. Good morning, and remember, have you spell your names?
Certainly. Good morning. My first name is Joseph, Joseph. Last name is Sitta, Citta. I live in Columbus, Nebraska. I'm seeking reappointment to the Environmental Quality Council. If confirmed, this would be my 5th term. I've been on it for 4 terms. I represent the power generating area. A little bit about myself. I'm married. I have 3 grown children. I've lived in Columbus for 45 years. I'm a Nebraska native, originally from Bellevue, Nebraska. I graduated from Hastings College, Bachelor's of Art degree in biology. I currently work for Nebraska Public Power District. I'm the Director of Corporate Environmental and Water Resources. I've worked for the district for 45 years. Also, other capacities, I'm chairman of the board of the Lower Loop NRD. I've been on the NRD board for over 30 years. I've been, like I mentioned, on the council. I'm also on the Platte River Recovery Program. In fact, when I leave here today, I have to go to Kearney for a 2-day meeting on the Platte River Recovery. On a national level, I've served as chair of the Environmental Task Force for the Large Public Power Council and for chair of the Environmental Task Force, the APPA. I am a registered environmental manager and a certified hazardous material manager. So just a little bit about my background, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sitta.
Sitta, yes.
Sitta, thank you,
Chair.
Are there any questions from the committee board? Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chairman Bosselman. Thank you, Mr. Sitta, for being here. I apologize if I'm going to ask you more questions than I asked last time, but that was a little difficult.
All right. But, no, I look forward to them, sir.
Well, my first question is just generally, can you give me an overview of what the Environmental Quality Board does?
Well, predominantly 2 things. The council, as the Chair Bosselman mentioned, is a 17-member council from basically all walks of life across Nebraska. A couple things. We primarily would approve the environmental regulations for the state of Nebraska. So we run public hearings where the public can come and testify. The NDE has the proposed regulations that are advertised, and they have outreach. And then we hold a hearing, public hearings, take testimony, similar to what you all do. We take testimony, and then we would rule on whether to approve the regulations or disapprove and ask for revisions. The other thing was we administer, like what Mr. Hall mentioned earlier. There's a couple funds, a drinking water fund that we administer for cities and taxable entities to look at drinking water and wastewater treatment. They have some very low interest funds that on loan situations where they can do for clean water and wastewater. So, but those are primarily the two. Also, we can serve as a sounding board for the public. Naturally, we don't have any enforcement responsibilities. However, being with all walks of the public, we are a sounding board where the public can contact us, and then we can take those issues to the appropriate regulatory agencies. I know I've been talked to on several occasions from the public regarding some environmental concerns. And then I can pass those on, take those up and pass them on and have a little oversight. So that's primarily it in summary.
Thank you. So
Certainly.
in terms of the 17 members, obviously you represent power generators, and Mr. Hall represents labor unions, which is, I assume, people who are employed in the fields. Is there ever a time in which there's a conflict between your employer's interests and the proposals in terms of regulatory constraints that might come before the
I've really not noticed that, because, well, luckily where I work, I mean, we're very environmental sensitive and very environmentally proactive. So no, I've not noticed any conflict. And on the council, even though I do represent the power industry, I'd like to feel I pretty much represent the people in Nebraska and try to make decisions based on what I believe is best for the state and the people in Nebraska. And in turn, that falls right in line with public power.
Well, I agree with that perspective too.
Okay, sir.
I think that your purpose there is to bring the perspective, but to represent the people of Nebraska.
Yes, sir.
So I would agree with you on that. Thank you.
I'm very passionate about that.
You've got it. I'm blown away by your credentials, so I appreciate your willingness to serve. Thank you.
No, thank you, sir.
Senator Mosier?
Do you know of the other members of the council, how many of those seats are reserved for people from certain entities like public power or labor, or are some of the seats just for the general public?
Pretty much not. I mean, for example, there's, as you can imagine, there's different levels of industry, agriculture, there's county government, city government is representative, minorities, there's biologists, there's a physician. So, I mean, it try to hit all the walks of life, but as far as just, let's say, an ad hoc or a member of the public, no, I don't believe so. They're typically associated with representing a
So
certain
each
group.
of the 17 seats has some background in some perspective of environmental quality.
Environmental or public health, yes. For example, the physicians there naturally to help get information and evaluate, public health scenarios. They have a biologist that's there that looks at, the biological piece. So they try to hit, it's really been successful. I'm just amazed at the ability of this group to work together.
Do you elect your own chairman of your board?
We do. We elect our own chairman, and luckily enough, I'm presently chairman of the board of the council.
Are there requirements that certain numbers of the members be affiliated with a particular political party?
No, not to my knowledge, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly. Thank you, Senator.
Senator Gregor?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for your testimony.
Certainly.
I'm interested in your perspective on the nitrate issue
Mhm.
in parts of Nebraska, and how do you see us moving forward on the water quality with specifically nitrates?
Okay, of course, the groundwater, once again, typically the groundwater quality, it's a combination of, what the NDE would require, also with the NRDs. The NRDs also have a significant interest in nitrates. In fact, I know I could speak for the NRD that I'm on, that I know we are looking at some special water quality areas in the lower loop where we're looking at regulating the amount of nitrogen and that's being placed in the different hotspots. But also, and we work in conjunction with the NDEE, for example, for the CAFO, the confined feeding operations and the manure, the amount of manure that could be put out on the ground. So to me, it's a combination of both, which would be the environmental regulations for the state, but then also more specific, the local control for the NRDs. I hope I addressed that, but it is a significant issue and needs continued focus.
Okay, that's what I was really after the last part of your sentence.
Oh, it is. I mean,
Is that how you feel the nitrate issue is in Nebraska?
I do. I mean, there's many areas that are quite a bit above the drinking water standards. And they're doing studies more and more. In fact, we just had a presentation from the university to find out there seem to be more and more health effects than was originally expected from the amount of nitrates that's in the water, especially to certain classes, children and women with pregnant women. So it does need focus, and I believe that I know in certain areas it is being focused on more, but it needs to be aggressively looked at. I see it as an issue.
Thank you.
Definitely. I hope I addressed your question.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Senator.
I would have a follow-up question. I think that what
Yes,
Senator
sir.
Kavanaugh asked, on the rigs or those type of things, do you only review what's brought to you, or do you have the ability to form or change rigs from the council?
We have the ability, although because of the public notice requirements, any change has to go back and be public noticed, and then we would have to hold a hearing on. So when we actually have, and when we're hearing a regulation itself, we don't have the ability to change it there at that time and vote. Basically, if there's a change, we request a change or ask the NDE to look at it, then they go back and have to follow the public rulemaking
All right,
process.
thank you. I think you answered that, and my question should have been better. You got to the end was, can you as a body request, can the council make a request or a statement to DE for a specific change?
Yes,
Because
sir.
You're seeing.
I'm sorry if I
before
took
that
the,
come- No, you're fine.
took
You're
the
fine.
long road there. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You answered my question. I just should articulate a little bit better.
That's okay.
Knowing what this council does, are you particularly interested in seeing any rules made in any specific area? Is there any, like I asked Mr. Hall, is there any changes you would like to see made?
Not really. I think it's a very effective, and once again, it's an example of the local control that Nebraska is famous for. But no, I think it's a pretty workable. And sometimes the ability to change the regulation gets a little clumsy, but following the public process is understandable, and the public rulemaking process. But no, actually, I think it works fairly well. I do not have any issue.
Other than maybe what Sergeant Gregory was talking about, is there any other areas in particular that you think should be addressed or could be addressed?
Well, I think, once again, everybody's concerned about climate change and the balance, just like, with all due respect, just like the issues, that you wrestle with, it's an evaluation of balance on what what we need for environmental sustainability, but also reasonableness and affordability. But I believe one of the big areas that we're probably going to see a lot of focus on in the future is regulation, probably on carbon and climate change. I see that as an upcoming issue.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Sergeant Kavanaugh.
Senator.
Thank you, Chairman Bossman. I just want to follow. So in terms of, you think regulating carbon is something that the board would consider in the future?
No, I believe that's some upcoming. I know on a federal level, we're hearing. In fact, I think right now with you probably heard there's a lot of debate going on in the budget reconciliation process, trying to get a clean energy standard or carbon standard in. And once again, once there's a federal regulation, it follows the states to implement that. And then our council would be addressing those on a state level. So I believe that's just some upcoming regulations that we will anticipate to see.
And you think you're prepared for that conversation?
Well, sir, that'll be hard to say. It'll depend on how impactive the proposed regulations are. But it's with the diverse group that we have and the experience, it'll be an interesting conversation, but will be challenging. It's certainly not an easy thing to try to address, but I think it's coming.
Thank you.
I don't know. It's hard to say. We'll just have to wait and see what happens, but it's a pretty diverse group.
Okay, seeing no other questions, thank you, Mrs. Sitta, for your willingness to continue to serve on the Quality Council. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you this morning.
Thank you
Appreciate
for being
you.
in this morning. I would ask anyone who would like to testify as a proponent for the confirmation of the reappointment for Mr. Joseph Sitta to please step forward. Anyone testifying as a proponent? Anyone would like to testify as an opponent to the reappointment of Mr. Sitta? Anyone would like to testify in the neutral capacity on the reappointment of Mr. Sitta? Seeing none, that will close our hearing for the reappointment of Mr. Joseph Sitta to the Environmental Quality Council. Our next confirmation hearing will be for Marty Stainhe. If you please step forward. Good morning, and please state and spell your name for us to begin with.
Yes. Yeah, my name is Marty Stange. It's spelled Martystange. And just a little bit about me. I was born and raised at Carroll, Nebraska, near Grand Island. Yeah, Cairo by some folks. I'm a UNL graduate. I've been employed with the city of Hastings and Hastings Utilities since 1989. And currently I'm the environmental director. I'm a professional engineer. Been also several professional licenses, such as a grade 1 water operator. I'm also an asbestos construction supervisor, just multiple duties you have to do with the city of Hastings. I work with water, sewer, solid waste, air emissions. If it says environmental, they usually throw it on my desk with the city. I'm also a civil engineer by training, so I'm the senior design engineer for the community. I've been working on Superfund sites for the city. In fact, I like to say that the reason I got my job with the city was I answered the question, do I know what an aquifer was? And I got that job. So, and principally with the Superfund activities, I've been responsible making sure that we understand the impact to the municipal water supply system and really the financial stability of the community. Certainly there's a team of a lot of people. I've worked with the local NRDs, the NDE, UNL, wellhead protection. We've certainly done a lot of work over the years regarding the nitrates and the uranium that's coming into the community. I've been the project leader for the Hastings Aquifer Storage and Restoration Project, and that's gone very well. We've seen a lot of good communication with the rural and urban folks to see if we can move that forward. I've served on several regulatory committees and often asked by my peers to provide training and so forth. So with that, I guess to answer the question, why do I want to be on the committee? First of all, I was brought to my attention there was an opening, and so I asked a few of my peers what they thought, and they thought I'd make an excellent choice to be in there just because of my years of experience of working with the NDE. And I believe that the one thing that I think has been very positive working with the NDE and obviously the NDEQ for a lot of those years is that, you know, they've always stressed compliance through education. And I think that's the one thing that I've really found as a positive experience working with those folks. There's, you know, like myself, there's a lot of different things we have to do, and we're not experts at everything. But to be able to go to these folks and, you know, get the assistance you need and work through those without need to go to enforcement, I think it's a good thing for the state of Nebraska. And when I talk to peers outside of the state, they're very envious of what we have. So I think we have something very positive.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions?
Are there questions from committee members? Mr. Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chairman Bosselman, and thank you, Mr. I'm sorry, is it Stange?
Stange.
I'm sorry, I wrote my handwriting's terrible. Stange. So, would you be filling a specific position on the board for municipal?
Yeah, it's a small community municipal government. Yeah.
And you listed off a lot of interactions with entities. Have you had any specific interactions with the Environmental Quality Council that come to mind?
Yeah, not specifically with the council itself, but, you know, obviously when we deal with rules and regulations, we've, you know, had a lot of peer groups and, you know, we work with some of those members on that committee. So, yeah, fully aware of some of those folks.
And so you talked about I guess the positives about NDE being compliance through education, which I kind of like that saying. But I think you probably heard Mr. Hall talk earlier about the issue in Meade. And to me, obviously, that seems like maybe a failure in lack of actual direct action by NDE. Does that?
Well,
I guess just throwing that out for comment.
yeah, I'm not sure that I know enough about the entire Meade issues out there, but just knowing how spills can occur and how things take place, it's always a little bit of tyranny of small decisions, and things kind of happen as they go. You know, certainly working with the Superfund issues, it's complex. So I understand that. But yes, it needs to be addressed. I think it's going to be a legacy that Meade's going to have to deal with for a long time.
Right. Well, I guess my point or question is more like I like the idea of just the ideal is compliance through education, but obviously, I guess my question is, you recognize that there's a necessity for maybe a more pointed approach by some of the regulatory agencies.
Yeah, I think my response would be that there are people that are willing to take education. I mean, you can lead the horse to water, but it may not drink. That doesn't mean that these folks would have taken on a role of saying, I want to work with you. So, I don't know those folks. I deal with folks that just say, yeah, I'm going to do what I do, and I'm not going to take any advice on doing a better job. So.
Right. And my question is from a regulatory standpoint, what do you do in that situation when they don't take that ideal?
There's always a place for enforcement. You do the best that you can. I kind of like to say it's, 3 strikes you're out type thing, but there are all obviously going to be some people that you're just not going to get to, and you're just going to have to go through that path.
Thank you.
Other questions? Senator Grigger.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for your testimony. You have quite an extensive background of water, sounds
I
like.
do.
And I'm going to go to water, and again, nitrate issue. What is your perspective on local and state government as far as working the issue of nitrates in Nebraska?
The NRDs have been a tremendous asset for the community of Hastings. And I'll say this. A lot of times I'll go to an NRD meeting, and the first thing they'll ask is, how much money do you want? It's usually that's what people come to a meeting and ask. And what I've said is, it's not that we wouldn't like always more money to help, deal with the issues of nitrates and uranium that we're dealing with. But a lot of times we just need the technical side of it. And I know working with the Upper Big Blue and the Little Blue NRDs, they have been very great and gracious in giving us staff time to help us figure out where the problem is, how best to try to address those issues that are out there. And sometimes just the educational part of it, and then coming to meetings where we're dealing with both the urban and the rural folks, knowing that we're working together and doing that. And, we leave the financial stuff to our council and our boards, and, let them deal with it. So, again, education is probably 90% of what it's going to take to resolve these issues that we have out there.
I understand Hastings has got a reverse osmosis plant.
Yeah, we do that as part of the Aquifer Storage and Restoration Project. That is just a focused treatment so that we can inject clean water back in the aquifer and, protect our municipal wells.
So your solution to the pollution is dilution?
Not necessarily. We're doing both a short-term and a long-term project. The short-term was by 2016, we weren't going to have enough water without some kind of treatment. So we needed to deal with that. And that's what the Aquifer Storage Restoration Project is about. But we're actively involved in the long-term and working with the NRDs to try to get, better control of the nitrates out there. Unfortunately, it's a nitrate legacy because as we've worked with the university on, we've got anywhere from 500 to 2,000 pounds of nitrogen in the vadozone. It's going to continue to go down into the aquifer. We certainly want to stop that. I mean, that's our future in here. We'd like to say that we don't have to replace that RO plant, but I think that would be kind of pie in the sky. But our view is we've got to address both the issue. We cannot keep polluting, And we've got to figure out how we can manage the pollution that's out there, as well as we got to protect the city's water supply.
So do you have a couple examples you could give me on how you're going to attempt going about the nitrate issue?
Yeah, one of the things that we're really pushing on is trying to do more incentives through the community. We do provide financing to some of the rural folks that are out there for like soil testing, those kind of things. We're actively sampling wells every year so we can monitor what's going on out there. We provide that to the NRDs. We are on about a 5-6-year program to go out and take vadozone sampling. We're financing that so that the NRDs can make good decisions on that. I would like to say that we're doing a good job, but the answer is we still have a lot of work to be done out there. But I really think some of it is going to be a change in the age of the farmer that's out there. Certainly sometimes we can get to the younger ones. We're working right now with the high school and the community college with those folks. And it's just, it took a long time to occur. It's going to probably take a long time to happen. I mean, I was one of those guys that put fertilizer on when I was a kid. So, and in the Platte Valley, we were injecting it pretty close to the aquifer. So I understand the problem, but we just going to have to continue to try to do better. It's out there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sir Mosier.
I don't know if you're familiar with what I'm asking for, but the aquifer travels from the northwest to the southeast
In Hastings, that's correct.
in kind of a slow migration. And are the nitrate rates too high everywhere, or as you get farther east, they're worse, or how do you?
We've actually sampled an area of 200 square miles for the city of Hastings. And so we've done a pretty good job of mapping it. And we went clear to the northwest to intercept the Platte River. And what you find is that there's a lot of nitrates along the Platte River, and it's just because it's a very shallow aquifer. So that very sandy soil up there is a source of nitrates. But there's also pockets of nitrates between the Platte River and the city of Hastings in that farm ground out there. Like I said, we've sampled the vadozone, and it's 500 to 200 or 2,000 pounds of nitrogen that's out there. We've also sampled the urban, the parks, the residential homes. We see it there as well. There's areas that are downgrading of the city of Hastings that has a large amount of nitrates as well. So it's throughout. As our goal, our logo says, it's everyone's responsibility. So,
Are some forms of fertilizer more prone to leaching into the aquifer?
yeah, we've actually done work with the university where we did radioactive isotope testing because there was a lot of concerns about, well, where was that source? We obviously have a very large feedlot, about 45,000 head that's in our wildland protection area and a gradient of the city of Hastings. What we found was, yeah, there was some runoff that was occurring from that livestock, but in the groundwater, it's anhydrous ammonia.
So you think, now, are some fertilizers applied granularly, or is that a lot more expensive than?
Well,
Yes.
yeah, and that's a good point because right now with CPI, they're actually going to more granular type of fertilizer application. We've got a large facility that they just erected in Hastings for the second time. It burned down with lightning strike. But we would like to see less anhydrous put on in the fall because that's where leaching is occurring. We see a lot more liquid that's being put on. We are certainly proponents of fertigation. Put it on when you need it. That's certainly helping a lot.
Injecting it into the irrigation
Yeah,
system.
through the irrigation system.
Yeah.
One of the things that, and this is a little bit more my personal thing, but we have some problems where we have, we'll get a hailstorm come through. If you put all your fertilizer on in the beginning through either the fall application or spring application, you get a hailstorm, everything gets wiped out, then all that fertilizer is still sitting there. Certainly the folks that are fertigating, they can stop fertigating. So we've got to address some of that. And, cover crops is one of the things we're really promoting for those areas that may have gotten damaged. It doesn't take a lot of fertilizer to damage a lot of water. So we got to hit there. But when it comes to nitrates, it's both the amount of fertilizer you put on and the amount of water you put on. We know that if you're not driving it down with over irrigation, that's the other side of it. So
The theory with the anhydrous was that it was supposed to bond with the moisture in the soil or something and stay close to where the roots are going to be.
it just didn't do that.
In real life,
I mean,
that doesn't happen.
No, I mean, like I said, we're 500 to 2,000 pounds of fertilizer that's past the root zone. Knowing my
Per acre, you mean?
yeah, per acre. And I know my grandfather would say that was a loss of income, and he was not happy about that. But and there's just no way to really get it back. It's just going to continue to leak into the aquifer. But if we can slow it down so we can manage it, that's really why we're promoting water conservation, doing, scheduling of irrigation, doing a better job. But not everybody's doing it. We can educate where we can, but there's some people that just can continue to put a lot of water on it, put way too much fertilizer on it. But
You see some of that in smaller ponds and lakes where they have too much nitrogen and then they get way too much algae and too much boxweed or whatever that is that coats them with that green scum.
yeah, we see that in Hastings as well. I mean, Lake Hastings and Hartwell Lake, deal with that same thing. It's again, how much fertilizer people put on their lawns. We're really trying to promote, better application, do mulching of your grass clippings instead of hauling them off, cut down on the amount of fertilizer you're putting on, those kinds of things. So
Are there certain fertilizers that are less likely to cause nitrate problems?
I mean, when you say fertilizers,
Well, I mean, like they have some that have more phosphorus in them and other types of, or do you need nitrogen to make crops grow?
you need nitrogen to make crops grow. There are some additives like Inserv and some of those that people can use that'll help bind it up, that kind of thing. As far as the homeowner, yeah, you can buy, 3 different chemicals in there, phosphorus and nitrates, but we don't really need a lot of phosphorus. We just need nitrogen. I will say this, we do permit our lawn care companies, if they put it on, we wanted to make sure that they were following good, best management practice. And what we found was a lot of them are putting on less fertilizer than what we had thought, because they actually add iron sulfate to their mix. It makes the grass look greener. And most of the public doesn't see a reduction in fertilizer as long as the grass is green. The good news is when we've done our vadosome sampling within the residential and urban areas, we've actually seen a 32% decrease in nitrates below the root zone. So we've done some benefits with the.
How about the concentration of herbicides in the groundwater?
We show small amounts of atrazine showing up, but given the depth, we're about 120 feet down. We just haven't seen a lot of that, but we did see it in the vadosome, so it's there. Just so far, we haven't seen very high levels. It's detectable, but not.
Atrazine, is that, what's the brand name?
It's a herbicide, and it's been around a long time. Yeah.
But like Roundup, you don't have excessive amounts?
Yeah, we haven't seen that in there, and we do extensive testing with all of those pesticides, and we do random sampling out in our wellhead protection area as well for those. Our bigger issue has been that the nitrates that enter the vadosome is causing biological activity, and it's causing a mobilization of uranium and selenium. So we're seeing contamination of heavy metals into our system because of that.
And what's causing that?
As the nitrates enter the vadosome, there's bacteria that's naturally occurring in the soil. It's actually mobilizing the uranium. And so we see not only an increase in nitrates, but we're seeing an increase in uranium. It also impacts selenium, chrome, and those. But selenium and uranium are the two that we're watching very closely right now. And part of our RO plan is to address that uranium that's coming through the system. So we have to take that out before we can inject the water back into the aquifer.
What do you do with radium after you filtered it out of the water?
Well, because it's naturally occurring, we're able to, at this point, the levels are low enough, we're able to send it to wastewater treatment, and it just goes through with our biosolids. But we have a plan in place that we could put in uranium removal, very similar to what the city of Grand Island has for their system out there. And then we'd have to then manage that waste stream that occurs. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Berger.
Thank you, Jim. Just one quick question. Title 130, I'm sure you're familiar with it. Do you feel that there's anything within Title 130 that needs to be addressed that will close the gap between DE and the NRDs as far as groundwater and surface water issues? Let me be a little more specific for you. The certain activities that take place in a already high nitrate area, that one looks at surface water, the other one looks at groundwater, and the can's being kicked left and right.
You know, I think that we can do better in bringing more people together. But I also remember something that a professor taught me when I was in college, is that we don't want one person responsible for all water issues. I think having kind of multiple views that are out there, it's good. It might be a little slow, but I would prefer that over having one group just dominate that. I would say that, you know, we've come a long ways when there was definitely a distinction between groundwater and surface water. Just looking at what we see along the Platte River, and we understand that whatever's on that surface out there and it leaches into the aquifer, I mean, there's the connection. So I think we've come a ways on it, but I don't know that I have anything specifically to say other than we just need to keep talking.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I like your knowledge in all you talk today. Thank you.
Have you had the opportunity to attend any of the quality council meetings?
No, I have not. So this is going to be definitely a learning experience for me. But I think there's some good folks on there that will guide me.
Sure, I'm sure, certain so. Okay. I think that is all we have for you this morning. Thank you for your willingness to serve on the Environmental Quality Council. Thank you for driving in this morning and being with us, Mr. Staney.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone would like to testify as a proponent for the appointment of Mr. Staney? Anyone would like to testify in opposition to the appointment of Mr. Staney? Is there anyone who would like to testify in the neutral capacity? Seeing none, that will close our hearing for the appointment to the Environmental Council for Mr. Marty Staney. Our next appointment hearing will be for Jessica Coulterman. Good morning, Jessica. If you would
Good
please
morning.
state and spell your name for us when you're ready.
Sure, of course. Jessica Coulterman, Jessica Coulterman. I am a native of Seward, Nebraska, born and raised. I had the opportunity to attend college in Missouri at William Jewell, and then came back here and received my master's from the University of Nebraska. And then had the privilege to serve as legislative aide to Senator Elaine Stewart, who actually was involved with many of these issues that you're talking about. She served on natural resources. Following my time at the legislature as a staff person, I did governmental relations for Farm Bureau for around 10 years. So I was in front of this committee on a regular basis. And then took an opportunity after I helped recruit Costco and Lincoln Premium Poultry's facility to Nebraska. I ended up going to work for them. So for the last 5 years, that's what I've been doing. And in my spare time, I am on the city council in Seward. So I have municipal background to the extent that a city council person is involved in those things as well. I wanted to answer, Senator Mosier, your question. You specifically asked all the different types of things that were represented on the Environmental Quality Council. There is a person that represents ag crop production, ag processing industry, which I understand is like feed mills and those types of things, automotive, petroleum. There's a biologist, chemical industry, city government, conservation, county government, food products manufacturing, which is the role that I was appointed to, heavy industry, labor, livestock industry, minority populations, municipal government, a physician, power generating industry, and a professional engineer. So you asked if there were some normal citizens, I guess to the extent that people in county and city government and all these other roles are normal members of the public. They are represented. They don't all bring tremendous amounts of expertise, but they all have some role in environmental in some way. So to answer another question about the nitrates, just thought I'd bring up something that we did as a company when we started Lincoln Premium Poultry here in Nebraska. Of course, when you go through the 200 plus public hearings that we went through for our facility, you get a lot of questions about environment. Costco's philosophy is number one, always obey the law. So everything we do is, falls in line with obey the laws as they are. Occasionally, we find opportunities to go above and beyond. And when we were looking at all the chicken litter that was going to be coming out of these poultry barns around the entire region, one of the things that people, of course, get concerned about is groundwater and protecting the aquifer. Knowing that that was going to be a concern before it was even brought up in any public hearings, Lincoln Premium Poultry and Costco sat down with the Department of Environment and Energy, at the time it was DEQ, and said, we want to understand all your regulations. We want to understand what this looks like. So we make sure that we're on full compliance on the farms. So we would put in our contract with the farmers, these are the guidelines, these are things we expect you to do. And if you break these rules, then we will terminate your contract. What we found out is because chicken litter is a dry form of fertilizer, it did not have the same regulations that you would for perhaps cow manure or pig manure. So we asked the state to develop some. So for us, we have our people who are contracted with us apply for what is referred to as a state operating permit. And that is issued by the state, and then they become inspected just like others. And it's required to do that in order to grow poultry for us. So we saw a place where we wanted to have more regulation for our people that were associated with us, and we asked the state to put it in, and they did. So it was our, little part we could do to help make sure that whatever we were doing was not going to harm any water in any way.
Thank you.
Yeah. Guess I'll open it for questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Coulterman, for being here this morning. Are there questions from committee members? Senator Gregor.
Thank you. Thank you specifically for addressing right away what you knew I was going to probably come with you in nitrates. Do you have monitoring wells then are they required on?
So in order to grow with us, the grower has to adhere to what is called a state operating permit. That's the environment and energy portion of it that they look at. But we also require something called a nutrient management plan. And so what they will do is before they grow, they submit the permit and they get the permit approved. And what they have to do in that permit is say, I have X number of acres where we know this fertilizer can be applied, and we require it through the nutrient management plan to be prescribed, applied in a prescriptive manner. So you can't just go out and dump fertilizer on your fields willy-nilly. It's very, specific. Then we have continued grid testing and making sure that everything is as it should be.
And DEE requires this nutrient management plan before any operation takes place, and I'm familiar with that.
With ours, yes.
However, do you also work with the NRDs and the groundwater? Are you in?
If they have a well, every NRD is different. That's one thing, I've had to navigate in the role that I sit in with the company is some NRDs have us go through a well process that's very complex, multiple hearings, lots of data, lots of specifics. Different NRDs require different things. So it really depends on where the farmer is and what their area looks like.
Are you currently now, or any of your facilities in the high nitrate area? Let me above 10 parts per million.
I can't answer that. I don't know for sure. I can tell you that, and I'm from Seward County. That's where I live. And, growing up, traditionally, that area has had some high nitrates, maybe not Seward, but out towards Beaver Crossing, Gunner, the area where our family farm was or is. And so we do have farmers in that area, but that's one of the reasons it was so important to us to have these requirements so that we knew that everything they were doing was protecting the groundwater. Do we have to make sure we do test the water that goes to the poultry? So we are testing that well as part of our quality control in terms of them raising the poultry for us. So I can't specifically say, I can tell you we haven't had any issues, but I can't tell you the specifics because I haven't gotten into the details of parts per million and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And I like your knowledge on the whole issue of nitrates. Thank you.
Well, surprisingly, I learned a lot in the last 5 years when I started learning about chicken. So
Sir Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chairman Bosman. Thank you, Ms. Coulterman, for your willingness to serve and being here. You went through the list pretty quick, and I missed which slot you're.
I'm going to be in the food products manufacturing area.
Well, so I had the opportunity to tour your facility it's in Fremont or outside Fremont.
It's in Fremont, yes.
Yeah, and if anybody hasn't toured it, you should go. It's really impressive. So I was very impressed. And I've talked about it a lot to a lot of people. So
Thank you.
I'm proud of the work you guys have done there. In terms of, I appreciate the story about going out and seeking that specific regulation. And one of the things about regulation is it provides certainty, which I think is what Costco is looking for there. Do you see any potentiality for further regulation suggestions coming before the Environmental Quality Council or NDE here that maybe would go counter to the business interests of Costco? I mean, obviously they want to comply with the law, but is there, I don't know, other places in the country that have maybe a more strict regulation that would potentially adversely affect the business?
Well, I mean, I was just out at Costco headquarters last week in Seattle, and one of the conversations that we had, we were actually talking about safety, environmental, all these different things, risk management, and those types of topics. I think the thing that I'm really excited about in being a partner with Costco in this is that they look at the law as it is and they, work with what's there. And because other places have more stringent restrictions, they often adhere to the most stringent restrictions they're aware of. So I'm going to use safety as an example. If you look at safety regulations in California, for example, which might have a higher or a more stringent specific to a certain kind of safety procedure, then that's typically what they do. My understanding is kind of what they do universally to reach the highest level that they can find. So we are very, we've enjoyed the partnership with DEE as we looked at building this up, this facility. Obviously, it brought a lot of economic energy and excitement to this part of the state, but it also brought a lot of technology and a lot of opportunity to, for lack of a better word, kind of raise the bar in some ways at places that, haven't been operating with that much technology and that much innovation. And so I think in order to, continue to keep that bar high, we're always going to be looking for new ways to do things that improve all aspects of the business, including how we protect the environment.
Thank you.
Sir Mosier.
Do the floors of most of those, or I suppose all of them, of those chicken barns have concrete in them?
No, they
or
do
are
not.
Dirt floors?
They're like a clay-based floor.
So do you have to take that dirt out and replace it after?
Well,
certain
it's
length of time,
we
or-
refer to it as litter. So what you do is you put bedding in. Typically, it's wood chips. We actually test the wood chips for quality to make sure that it's a good quality base for the poultry.
Make sure they don't have chemicals in them already.
Correct. And then we place the poultry. The poultry are there, and as you know, poultry will defecate around and then what happens is after the poultry is harvested, they come in and they do what is referred to as windrowing. So they pull all the poultry, wood chips and everything, and feathers, whatever's in there, they pull it into a windrow. And it heats up. And once it gets to a certain temperature, it starts to break down any bacteria, anything that's in it.
Kind of like the composting almost.
Yes, composting, exactly. And then after a while, once we've reached a certain temperature and the breakdown has occurred, the temperature will start to drop. And so then they turn it again, let it heat up again, and then they will spread it out again before the next load of poultry is delivered. And then at usually about once a year, the farmer will go in and they'll remove a layer of it. They won't remove it all because it makes a really great insulation and bedding for the poultry as they go into the winter. So typically in the fall, they remove a portion of it and then they apply that directly to the field in a prescriptive manner.
How thick would the typical coating of chips be?
You mean what would be applied to a field or?
Well, no, what's on the floor of the?
It varies from barn to barn. It really depends on the birds, but it can get 6 inches, deep would be, maybe a little bit more depending on how they spread it out themselves.
Yeah, just for my own information, it's not,
The neat
doesn't
thing,
affect how we look at your nomination, but.
I know, well, it's an interesting topic and certainly one that,
Well, not everybody probably finds it.
I know more about it than I ever thought I would.
Well, thank you, appreciate that.
So what drew you to apply for an appointment to the environmental?
Well, I know you might find this a bit humorous, but I get the lists from the governor's office regularly. And because we have an area of Seward and York and Polk County that my dad represents, I review it regularly to see if there's openings that might be a good fit for people that live in the district. And sometimes I do see those, but in this case, I saw one that was like, well, I could do that. So because of all the work we've done with the directors, all the different people and all the different agencies at DEQ, I called and asked a little bit about the position and they said, oh, you would be good at that. So I decided to apply.
Sure, great. Could you explain a little bit more what does food products manufacturing include?
My understanding is it's the packing plants, food processing, and
Larger function.
right. So that would be, all the food processing facilities in our state. I believe there's 14 or 15 of them across. I know Senator Aguilar, you have some in your district, and I believe you do too, Senator Bostelman. I think Senator Moser, you do as well. I don't know, Senator Kavanaugh, if you have any specific to your district, but I know there's some in Omaha.
Yeah, not anymore. The old District 9, not the current District 9.
So, when I sat in this chair, when I was a lobbyist representing agriculture, and never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd be sitting here talking about food processing and chicken, because it wasn't something that I had on my list of what I wanted to be when I grow up. But I found this industry to be very key in keeping our communities in the rural areas alive. And what we've been able to do, not just in Fremont with the plant, but with all of the fingers that have gone out. Like as an example, there's a company called Fremont Automation that ended up developing a piece of machinery that we had asked developers all over the world to work on who couldn't figure it out. But a company in Fremont, Nebraska did. And so we have put that in our facility, and they have a company with 25 people, and now they're expanding to other states, other poultry companies in other states. And for me, that's just really exciting to see that kind of innovation come out of something like this in a small town. And then the farmers, probably the thing that I'm get most excited about when I talk about the farmers are the kids. And I say kids because I'm over 40 now, so I'm allowed to say that. But the 21 or 22-year-olds that get to come back to the farm where they would not have had that opportunity otherwise. And they get to come back to the family farm and stay there because of the opportunity that they've had to raise poultry with us.
So with and this is kind of like a Senator Moser curiosity question, with your working with Costco and Lincoln Poultry and in the manufacturing of this, have you happen to have the opportunity, or is there the opportunity for all the other manufacturers that we talked about throughout? Do y'all get together or talk or?
Well, we started that during COVID. I mean, perhaps they did before. We had just opened only about 6 months before COVID happened. And so one of the things that we ended up doing right off the bat is in Fremont specifically, we started meeting weekly during COVID via Zoom. And, talking about how we could work together, how we could share best practices, it was to the point of hey, I have extra hand sanitizer. Do you guys need hand sanitizer? And hey, where are you finding this, the sanitation stations because we can't find them, those kinds of things and dialogues. But then later, as it went on, it expanded to things like, how do we continue to grow opportunities for people to recognize manufacturing as a great place to work and have a career? And how do we start to, engage our communities in the benefits of having manufacturing in our communities? And so the conversations have grown from where do I get hand sanitizer to more global conversations. Or as an example, we're working through this environmental regulation, who did you guys use as your engineering for when you went through that? Those kinds of conversations, just really great partnerships and resources that, I don't know, I mean, maybe if COVID hadn't happened, we wouldn't have had those same relationships, but I guess as a silver lining, we've developed a deeper relationship with other companies across our state.
Okay, good, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing no other questions, thank you, Ms. Coulterman, for coming in today and for your willingness to serve on the Environmental Quality Council.
Thank you.
Would anyone like to testify as a proponent for the appointment of Jessica Coulterman to the Environmental Quality Council? Would I like to testify as an opponent to Jessica Coulterman to the appointment of the Environmental Quality Council? I would like to testify in the neutral capacity. Seeing none, this will close our hearing on the appointment of Jessica Coulterman to the Environmental Quality Council. That will end our committee hearing for today. Thank you all for attending, and we'll see you tomorrow.